Coming up on Reasonably.
You, in the ponytail, is this what you want? Is this what any of you want?
What we want is what you got. Period. Time for you to leave, asshole.
Look, I fought him before. And after we took in his old friends, they become leaders in what we have here. Now you put down your weapons, walk through those gates. You're one of us. We let go of all of it. And nobody dies. Everyone who's alive right now. Everyone who's made it this far. We've all done the worst kinds of things just to stay alive. But we can still come back. We're not too far gone. We get to come back. I know. We all can change.
This is Reasonably.
I don't know if I should. I don't usually formally introduce anyone on the podcast.
I was going to say, do you have people say what their name is?
I don't usually because it's written down.
Okay.
You know, it'll say who you are. But in case this particular moment of the podcast makes the cut, this is this is Adina Nack, and for regular listeners of the show, her husband is our friend Jose Marichal, who is a dominant force in the podcasting business. And Adina is a professor of sociology at Cal Lutheran University, and she's a fan of The Walking Dead. So for me, I want to just talk about what I think, why I want to talk about The Walking Dead, and then we'll talk about The Walking Dead. So I'd never seen the show before. I just started watching it just a few months ago, I guess, like maybe around Christmas. I don't know, sometime around that. I was celebrating Christmas with The Walking Dead. But I'd heard about it. But first of all, I'm not a person who binge watches a lot of TV shows. I think it might be because I'm a writer myself. I lose interest after I get it. You know, like, okay, this is what they're doing. Usually that's what it works. You know, it's like, oh, I like this. This is kind of cool. This is different. But okay, I understand it. And it just stops being interesting to me. This show just gets more and more interesting to me. I've never seen anything like this before that hooks me personally the way this show has. And I've been watching it in a vacuum because, as we just discussed before, my wife won't watch the show with me, and I do not blame her for that. I don't recommend it to her. I talk about it all the time, and she's like, when you're talking about this show, are you expecting me to watch it so that we can talk about it together? And I'm like, no, I understand why you don't want to watch it, and I think you're right. You know, I think that you would find it awful. So I'm just watching it by myself, and fascinated with it. And what I would like to ask you, as a fan of The Walking Dead and as a sociology professor, and I see that what I would like to ask you, just for starters, is why do you like The Walking Dead?
So I have had a fascination with well-written horror for decades, probably. So starting with Stephen King novels.
Okay.
So, and I classify well-written horror as different from like slasher films,
sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and I have friends who are kind of in different areas of the entertainment industry who had given me a heads up that the books on which The Walking Dead is based, the graphic novels, were kind of interesting and sociologically compelling. So I had been primed that it might be something, given my past interest in horror and as a sociologist who teaches and studies about things like pop culture and deviance, that it might be something that I would find interesting. So I initially had a spousal disconnect as well. Jose said he had no interest in watching a series that involved zombies. And I said, well, we're going to have to agree to disagree. And then I don't know if I watched 1 or 2 episodes without him, but I told him, like, this is really interesting.
Yeah.
It's not just your run-of-the-mill, zombies gone wild type of plot. So I roped him into it, and we went on to watch seasons together. So, but in preparation for coming to talk with you today, I pulled up one of my first blog post about it way back in December of 2010.
Okay. When
I had just finished, and I think I was watching it pretty timely, if I'm not mistaken. So I think season 1 had just finished, and I had just finished watching season 1.
Right.
And I titled this post, "I'll take zombies over racists, rapists, and wife beaters any day." Because what was striking me just about that first season is that while the zombies were kind of gross and scary, they were not discriminating on the basis of sex, race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, ability. It's the people. There were these rotten human characters.
Right. Because all of the people that you just described were in the first season.
Right. And
many of them were eaten or
Exactly. You
and by the way, before you continue, just a warning. I think we should freely talk about spoilers because, first of all, it's 2016.
Right.
She's talking about something that happened 6 years ago. And second of all, we talked beforehand, coincidentally, it seems that you and I are both on the same episode, which only goes up to the midpoint of season 10.
Season 5.
Season 10. Episode 10. Yeah,
okay.
Right. Season 5, which is for me, and I think it's the same episode, it was the end of that hospital sequence.
Right.
So the rescue at the hospital, we don't have any spoilers beyond that.
So my proposal is that for today's podcast, we stop before season 5 and we save season 5 and 6 for when we fully watch them all and can process them, because we've got 4 seasons to talk about.
But I'm so devastated by what happened to Beth.
Okay, well,
but
we can go to the hospital if you need to.
No, I've been devastated so many times in this show that
yeah. So spoiler alert: if you have been asleep or not paying attention for the past 6 years, things might be spoiled for you.
Right.
I guess. Yeah. So I mean, again, the zombies are gross, but they don't have a functioning brain. They can't tell right from wrong, so you can't really be mad. Or disappointed with a zombie, right? Yeah. But the living human characters, they do have, in theory, the cerebral capacity to be moral or ethical or just act with compassion. And there was a lot of that not happening in season 1. And that's continued throughout the seasons.
Well, and a lot of that has to do with well, first of all, the brilliant premise of this just happened off camera while the main character was in a coma, and they don't really tell you why, right? So you are suddenly thrust into the post-apocalyptic zombie world,
and all hell has broken loose while he's been in a coma.
So you have the vestiges of being a white supremacist, the vestiges of being a woman married to an abusive husband, or the vestiges of being an abusive husband. All of that has carried over because it's just day 1 in this new horrific existence. Yeah. But those things they sort of get ground down, as one of the things that I love about the show is people in the most extreme conditions, which of course is just good storytelling. It's what's the most extreme thing that's going to happen. And in this show, everything is the most extreme thing.
I mean, you go back to Lord of the Flies, and you can see the virtue of putting, kind of pampered, privileged characters in a very unfortunate setting.
Right. But in this case, though, where those kids kind of degenerate into wild animals, in this case, a wide array of human characters, like the ones that you described, but also, innocents and all
heroic
that.
characters.
Yeah, they find their way towards an essence of humanity, so that you have Daryl, the white supremacist, becomes this great hero. As someone said in one of the episodes, you were made for this world. You were made for he was a lousy person and an unhappy person and a useless person before the zombie apocalypse, and now he's a great hero.
Well, I mean, knowing how to use a crossbow is, skill one.
He was made for it. He's
I guess followed by samurai sword use, which comes in later. But yeah, I mean, thinking back to the hospital scene, right, where you've got Rick waking up and trying to figure out what the heck is going on.
Yeah.
So the hospital is invaded by walkers, right? And then you have the soldiers choosing to execute ill and disabled patients rather than rescue them. Mm-hmm. So you see kind of this snapshot in those early scenes where it's going to be survival of the fittest.
Yeah.
If we think that social inequality doesn't matter, it really does, because everything's hitting the fan, and if you're lucky, you get out. But if you're going to be too much of a burden, we can't be bothered with you, right? And so you would think, though, then the humans would bond together, and things like bigotry and bias and sexism would fall by the wayside, because you'd have to, draw on your resources and not be having a bunch of infighting. But that's not what happens, right? So you see these kind of unsavory traits play out in several of the characters.
Well, it's not what happens right away.
But once they have time, once they're traveling as a group and camping out, and you start seeing people.
Yeah. Well, they also re-tribalize.
Yeah.
They become a tribe, and all those things. Like I love the idea of. I keep going back to Daryl, but I love the fact that the show makes me love this guy, and he's literally riding around on a black motorcycle with a Nazi SS symbol on the gas tank, but that's not important to him. Like, you kind of get the idea that it wasn't that important anyway. It was just sort of the life that he was
the
in.
younger brother.
Yeah.
To one of the really awful characters, right? Whose awfulness shines through time and time again. So I think we do come to see Daryl as the younger brother who maybe was putting on a bit of a racist show to keep his brother happy, rather than being a true heartfelt racist, right? Yeah. And he actually proves to be pretty chivalrous too, in terms of female characters. So he definitely comes across as likable. But I liked this idea that, they say societies, we get the monsters we deserve. Mm-hmm. And not that I didn't have a love for some types of vampires, and vampire literature and vampire movies at a certain point in my adolescence and college years, but I was kind of over vampires way before Twilight even came onto the scene. So it was interesting to see this shift from vampires to zombies. Yeah. And not just in this one show, but in some movies, as well as in even video games like Plants vs. Zombies. We were seeing kind of this drift around 2010 to this zombie interest. And then, so then you've got social commentators thinking about, do zombies represent when a society is kind of zombifying, when people are kind of, walking into walls because they're looking at their devices like cell phones. We're not really engaged with the world. When we are, slaves to consumerism and just so caught up with the latest things that we're not really deeply connecting with each other. So I like that. I like that level of the show too.
I think that's a really. I think that the why zombies aspect is just it's a really interesting thing to talk about, because I think there's lots of different things you could say that all make sense. Like what you just said makes sense. I usually think about I think about the rise of popularity of zombies. I always think of it as sort of a political thing, or it's because of the political polarization in the world, because people on the left and people on the right tend to view across that chasm as, what the hell is wrong with those people? You know, it's like
Yes.
like both sides think of the other as mindless zombies. You
Right.
know?
And there is that in the show. There truly are the civilized humans, although their level of civility can be debated. in different
Who
scenes.
interestingly, like, you know, what I was getting at, or
Right.
and what you were getting at before, they are from all walks of
Right.
life, but they come together and lose that polarity. They're
Right.
they're polarized by the emergency that they're in 24
Right.
hours
And you
a day.
definitely see different responses to how to create a civilization in the zombie apocalypse, right?
Mhm.
But then you also see kind of this demonization of the others, the uncivilized, and of course the truly uncivilized at first glance are the zombies or
Mhm.
the walkers. But then as we get into different tribes
Mhm.
of humans, we see some really uncivilized behavior as well,
Yeah.
right? So I think, yes,
Often-
this us versus them thing, while initially you might say people have to come together across
Right.
opposing views, we do see these different, as the group we start off with kind of splinters and connects and reconnects and relocates.
Mhm.
Sometimes they encounter humans who are very uncivilized, right? Or
they
highly organized but very
well, that's
immoral.
the thing. Like, they think that they're civilized. Like, you know, so getting into the season with the governor
Right.
character,
Mhm.
who, to me, the governor was everything about what had happened with Rick, the main character, from the first. Did the governor come in season 2? No, season 3. Season 2 was at the farm. Everything that had happened to Rick up until the point that the governor came in, the governor represented the exact thing that terrorized Rick, because he did not want to be that.
Mhm.
The person who took on the responsibility for everyone's lives, and it drove him to becoming Mao Zedong, you know? And Rick constantly backed off from that, and his internal struggle with, if I lead, I need an iron hand, but I don't want an iron hand, and I don't want to be responsible. I don't want to lead and make a mistake and somebody dies.
Right. I mean, you see Rick really being very concerned about losing what he would call his humanity,
Yeah.
right? And that comes to a head, I want to say we're at season 5, where he has to kill somebody by biting his throat out, pretty much.
Yeah.
He has to engage in very zombie-like behavior just to save
Yep.
his son, right? And speaking of sons and love of family and children, you know, that comes up from point 1 too. I don't know how. I think the hardest part of season 1 for me was the loss of the girl.
Yeah.
Right? You're kind of holding out hope that she's going to be found before.
No, was that one? That was season 2. That was at the
it?
farm.
She ends up at the farm.
Because
I
season
forget.
1
Did she
is
just
only
disappear?
6. Season 1 is only 6 episodes
Okay,
long.
so that must be season 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sort of segues into
And I apologize, I'm forgetting her name. That's amazing.
Sophia.
Sophia, that's right.
which by the way is Greek for wisdom, and she was lost in the woods.
Yeah, literally.
She was lost in the wisdom was lost in the woods, and then wisdom got killed.
All right. But you see this at the farm. Okay, so yeah, that's true. We are at season 2, where you really start seeing the first struggle of people having to reconcile that their loved ones are no longer human.
Yeah.
And so are you just going to keep them in a barn
Yeah.
and throw meat at them every once in a while because
Yeah.
you can't bear to
Yeah.
put them down?
Yeah.
Or do you eventually realize that, kind of as we do with our pets, that to euthanize
Yeah.
a loved one, it can be the most
I think that
powerful sacrifice.
What you're talking about right there is the central aspect of one of the things that's so fascinating about this show is, you know, like if you look it up online and try to, you know, what are people saying about the show is what I've done. Like, God, and of course they're talking, you know, incredible volumes of talk about this show and essays and whatever. But I mean, the divide between I love this show or I'm repulsed by this show, or the ones that really interest me are I watch it, I don't like it. You know, and I stopped watching it. And there's a lot of ones where I stopped watching The Walking Dead in season 3 because, and it's some
Something
angry
pushed them too
thing.
far?
It did. That's
Yeah.
because what it is, and again, it goes back to I've never seen a TV show like this. They tapped out because the show says What I think it's saying, or one of the things that I think is really challenging and in your face to the audience, is it really challenges the materialistic point of view that we've all sort of been raised in modern culture of, well, science tells us that you don't really have a soul or a spirit or anything like that. It's all neurons and chemicals in your brain, and you only think that these things are happening, but it's really it's an illusion. It's an illusion. It's chemistry, and we're like, really, and that's kind of depressing. But you don't really necessarily think about it that much. This show says, if that's true, what do you think about this? And what they do is they show you over and over and over again in these really graphic ways that your body is just your body. Because the writers and the characters eventually begin to treat it with such disdain. Mm-hmm. And they say, at the beginning, they say things like, don't smile when you kill, there's something wrong with you because you smiled when you killed that zombie. It's not funny, right? And it isn't funny, but as with like zombie movies from the 70s and the 80s, it is kind of funny. There's a scene in Walking Dead where they back up over they get stuck on it, and I knew they were going to do this. The car was stuck on a bunch of zombies, and I was like, oh my God, he's going to gun the engine as if he was stuck in mud. And when I saw that, I started laughing. It's like,
dark
it's
humor.
Too much,
Yeah. Yeah, although you bring up, when you started talking about the science, that brings up my medical sociology critique, which is, I am dissatisfied. The one thing I'm consistently dissatisfied with in the show is their confusing ideology of the zombie as an epidemic. Uh-huh. So, is it transmitted by scratching? Is it transmitted by biting? They seem to say yes to both those things, right? But then they throw in at the farm this idea that if you amputate the limb that is bitten or scratched soon enough, then you prevent the person from becoming a zombie. And that's just BS when it comes to the circulatory system, right? It's bad science when it comes to if it's something kind of germ or blood-borne, mm-hmm. then once somebody's lower leg is bitten or scratched, it would be in that person's bloodstream and no amount of amputation. So I guess they kind of, when they solve it by amputating, it makes me think, well, maybe the zombie virus is supposed to be something kind of like gangrene, like a slow-moving bacterial infection. Right. Except that they keep showing you over and over again people getting turned pretty quickly.
Oh, well, I have an answer to that.
So I wish they would have a zombie epidemic. This is the physiology of zombies.
I have an answer to that because I think that I saw some viable reasons for that at some point in the show, because they changed what they said. They had a revelation that they realized that there was that scene when they said, and I think it was in season 2, where they said we're all infected. So anyone who dies is going to turn into a zombie. Right. So I think that the biting, like when Herschel lost his leg, right. I think the instantaneous, Rick just happened to have an axe ready, and they instantly amputated his leg. I think that's what you said, the gangrene thing. It's not supposed to. It would just be like being bitten by anything. You cut the leg off before that infection kills you. He's going to turn into a zombie whether he was bitten or not if he dies. Right.
So the whole thing is true. They do introduce that idea that everybody's infected. It's just a matter of if you stay alive, you don't turn. Right. You turn if you die. Right. But then you consistently see people where their injuries just shouldn't be life-ending turned by you're like, they didn't lose enough blood.
Well, did they die or did they turn into a zombie first?
It does usually show them dying and then kind of reanimating in zombie form, right? So, it kind of leads to that idea that everybody's going to become a zombie if they die. Yeah. So, if anybody dies, you have to behead them or skewer the brain in some way, right? I think...
beheading them doesn't work. That's even grosser because the head is just alive on the ground.
But see, okay, so that's where it takes me back to the problems with the physiology of it, and that's why I don't buy the whole everybody's a zombie once they die, because then why this focus on the brain, right? Like, there have been past zombie films where they have like the zombies only eat brains.
Yeah.
The zombies in this series, they eat any part of a living creature, right? So they've gotten rid of the zombie eating brain, but they've kept the part that like the zombie essence somehow is centered in the brain, and all you have to do is stab the brain.
Well, this goes back to what I was just saying a minute ago about this sort of full frontal assault on modernity and materialism, because modernity tells us that we are our brain, right? It's my ego is located somewhere in my head, right? And it's all this conglomeration of chemicals. And what the show is saying, because the only thing that they said that was remotely scientific about this was at the end of season 1, when they were at the CDC in Atlanta, and they had a brief explanation of somehow this disease reactivates your cerebral cortex, and that's what makes your body work. So what it's saying in my little theory, and again, I don't know that they're saying this on purpose. I think this just sort of spontaneously arises like any good myth would, and I mean myth like in the real sense of mythology. I think what they're saying is, if you think that you are your brain, you're just wrong. The brain is just part of this body, and it's the thing that activates, it's the thing that's powering it and all this stuff. So this disease is activated in the brain, and it makes your body work, whether the lower half of your body is even attached or not, right?
Well, see, and I interpret it exactly the opposite way, where I think it reifies the brain as the organ of importance.
But just remember that it's the organ of importance for being alive as a human body,
and for killing the zombie.
Well, because it's where the zombie's life is.
So it again is like, that's the all important organ, which I think we still use. We still talk about people becoming brain dead, and that being a reason to take them off life support, right? That plays out in kind of today's medicine. If somebody is brain dead, we use terms like they're a vegetable.
Yeah.
We dehumanize them once the brain is dead.
Yeah.
We don't have brain transplants yet. It's kind of scary to think about.
But it's kind of like a car without an engine in it.
Right.
I don't think we're in disagreement. I think we are saying the same thing. I just think that there's a different emphasis on what that means.
Right. So I think they're very pro-brain, and keeping a narrow focus on the brain as the most important organ. Maybe getting to the same point you're getting to, but I still think they overvalue, or maybe correctly value, depending on your perspective.
I think we're in agreement. But just to clarify what I mean, the brain is the most important thing to making that body work. But what they're saying is those dead bodies, the walking dead, are dead, right? So the fact that their brain still works doesn't matter, because that's not who they are,
right? Which
was the lesson that Herschel had to learn, when he had his family and all the neighbors in the barn.
The governor who saves his daughter.
Yeah, right? It's the same thing. It's like, I cannot let go of this body, and I believe that a very consistent message of the show is they're already not here.
Right.
That doesn't mean that they don't exist, but that little 12-year-old daughter's body is just a dead body that happens to be animated because this thing fires up the engine again. But the engine is just the engine.
But I do feel like there is an absence of any deep discussion of spirituality or souls. Even when we get into the church setting, that's really kind of like a building. It's not, we don't really go deep into any sense of, so it makes me wonder, I'd kind of be curious whether the original writer and the show creators are leaned more towards agnostic and atheist, because there is a real absence of any discussion of souls or spirituality.
There's an absence of any kind of I'm blanking on the word I'm trying to find. Conventional talk of soul or spirit, because to me there's a total absence of it. It is not mentioned at all. Right. I think very much on purpose it is never mentioned. The thing that is said in almost every episode, but certainly every other episode at least, is some horrific thing is going on. The heroes are being called upon to once again change their approach, right? Like you said, Rick is now killing people,
Right.
where he wouldn't do that before. But the question is always, and it's a character like Herschel, sort of the wise old man, somebody, or maybe it's the innocent girl.
Mm-hmm.
They say, we can still be what we were before. Like, you know, like what this is about, what this has to be about is not losing what it means to be human.
Right.
It's not, and what that thing is that is totally unspoken is, I think, something about spirit, something about soul, but it's never, ever, ever mentioned, and church is not going to help you. They make that very, very clear as well.
Right.
It's not in church.
That's what makes me feel like it's intentional, because it is all but said that people have a soulfulness, but that's what makes me feel like there must be you know, a good group of atheists or agnostics behind the show, because they go to extraordinary lengths not to talk about souls or people going to heaven, right? Like the body's here, but there's none of that. And there would have been so many opportunities, because the way Herschel is presented and that kind of farm life, they look very, I don't know, Baptist. They look very, They look like they would have been serious church-going people. And then you actually get to a church with an African-American pastor, and there's no talk about things there either. So there's multiple opportunities when the idea of God or souls could be brought in, and they're not brought in, which makes me think more about the creators than it does about the premise of the show.
Well, I want to make what I'm saying clear. I don't think that what I'm talking about has anything to do with religion. And I don't think it has, and I agree that is carefully avoided in the show, but I think it's avoided on purpose. I think that part of the message is none of these things are going to help you when it comes down to this.
But that's an atheist message, and I'm not saying it's wrong. And I've never heard it critiqued in this way until we're talking about it now. But I'm sure other people have noticed, because it's it really is, but I wouldn't say it's a nihilistic message. It's the strength of, it's kind of the strength of the human being regardless of spirituality, right? This idea that there can be a moral core in the absence of any sort of formal religion or formal spirituality.
Well, see, that's the thing, is formal religion, and I wouldn't say formal spirituality, I would say actual spirituality. Like it is or it isn't. It doesn't really matter how you approach it. We either all have a spiritual component to us or none of us do, right? Which is one thing that I, frankly, and if you can enlighten me on this, I'd love it. I don't understand modern atheism. I don't understand what they're talking about, because they seem, guys like, what's that guy's name? Sam Harris, seem extremely nihilist, even though they keep saying that they're not. Like, it's like, well, I'm not nihilist. I just don't believe that there's anything other than this chemical thing going on in my brain. And I'm like, well, that is what that is. Like, I don't understand what you're talking about. Not you, him.
Yeah.
So this is an interesting point, because I think this is part of the reason why this show resonates so much. I think that what I'm talking about is there is a spiritual component to this show that is strictly talking about, I guess, what I just said. We either have a spirit or we don't, right? It doesn't say that we do, and it doesn't say that we don't. What I think it does is challenge the viewer to say, here's your body, just like here's this guy's body, and then you become a character in the show. I've never seen something that made me feel part of the tribe as much as this show. I feel like I'm in the room with them, just sort of in the back. When something happens and they come out, like, dude, I'm right there with them every time. But I'm seeing this dead body, and I'm seeing people who would never kill a person in their life do it with ease at some point. And they turn their mind off to what it is that they're doing because it has to be done. And then you see these progressive, you see the line of morality being moved constantly. Like, at some point, killing the zombies, well, it's merciful. Like, when I see somebody in some horrific condition and they're, and it's like, yeah, could you kill that thing before you leave? all of those things make you question how you see the real world. You know what I mean? Because the value of real people, even if they are the opposite of your political party, or even if they're whatever they are, but the value of real human beings as opposed to these fictional creatures, it makes you question how you look at that, and it makes you question yourself. And I think to me, it really puts that question of, is there something more than this, front and center in a way that I think makes people uncomfortable, and I think that's why they turn the show off. If they're okay with the violence, and then they're, you know what, I don't like this show anymore, I think they're tapping out of like, how close can we get you to this idea that there isn't anything after you die, right?
Right. That's what I'm saying. I think the show works because, at least in the U.S., but I think it's true in a lot of other countries, we have seen, decreasing numbers of people identifying with organized religion, and increasing numbers of people minimally identifying as unaffiliated or as agnostic, or definitely a growth in people identifying as atheists, right? So there is a lot of pushback.
Well, and spiritual but not religious is the other hyphenated term. So that people self-identify as.
Yeah, and I still feel like there would have been lots of opportunities for them to reform more explicitly, or to have the characters grapple with the idea that when you were killing the zombie body, the soul was released, or was the soul released when the infection took over the brain? Yeah. But before we go too far down the spiritual...
Ooh, sorry.
It's okay. Good time for an edit.
Yeah.
So I wanted to bring up, I don't know if you've ever heard of this, there's a long-standing battle between people who believe in the slow-moving zombie versus the fast-moving zombie. And it's actually really hardcore for horror people. Uh-huh. They take this very seriously.
You mean outside of The Walking Dead?
Yes.
Okay.
In the history of zombie myths and stories and movies, because of the physiology we were just talking about, that if the body is dead, the brain could be firing away, but like you're missing chunks of muscle that should be animating your limbs, and yet these zombies, some of them in The Walking Dead, are incredibly fast and agile. Right? So, which I think adds to the terrifying nature, right? A fast-moving enemy is much scarier than the slow-moving. The only ones who end up slow are the ones who are literally missing half their bodies and are kind of lurching or reeling along. But so I didn't know if you had a stance on that, if you wanted to take a position on whether, given what you know of the ideology of zombie physiology, should there be fast-moving zombies, or should all zombies be as slow as...
Well, I think, I'm not sure, but I think it is shown in this TV show. It depends on how far gone they are. I mean, some of them are just pulling themselves along with their hands, with all of their entrails hanging out behind them.
But they don't even seem to... Okay, so here's where the anatomy just bugs me, because still, bones don't move, muscles move bones. So if you've lost a certain amount of your muscle mass, reanimated or not, you shouldn't be able to move that fast.
But don't they show that though, where they're
but only in like the extreme cases.
Each actor who is playing a zombie on that show has a different affliction.
True.
Like some of them have a horrific limp, and it might be because they don't have a quadricep muscle or something. Right.
I still feel like if you watch it really carefully, there's a lot of fast-moving zombies whose bodies are pretty decimated. So that's a small qualm in a very interesting show.
Point taken.
But yeah, also when I was thinking about the show, on The Walking Dead has become this pop culture phenomenon in terms of like there are bobblehead dolls and there are T-shirts being sold and Halloween costumes. So apparently one of the slogans that they put on the gear that they sell for the show is "Fight the dead, fear the living." So it kind of gets back to kind of our introductory concept of what's really scary about this show. And it's true, the zombies become a reason for humans to be in scary situations or to make really awful decisions, morally problematic decisions. Right. But it's the other living people that continually prove themselves to be horrific.
And almost all of them they're all trying to do what in their mind is the right thing to do. Even Merle. I mean, Merle's the right thing to do in Merle's mind is to survive and get the bastards before they get you, right? That's sort of his way of being. But the other guys that are a little bit more obvious than Merle would be like the governor, Herschel. When they go to the farm, Herschel's not a bad guy, but Herschel is problematic in that I don't want these people to be here. So here he is, this what he seems to be a very good Christian living on a farm somewhere in Georgia with his family, and his thing is, we're not taking in these strangers. People are dangerous. These are dangerous times. And also he has this shame thing going because he knows that he's got his family and the neighbors in the barn
right.
because he can't let go of them, So he's got this sort of mental block of, I've decided that I don't understand what zombies are. It doesn't make any sense. My wife is not dead. None of them are dead. And then this has to be graphically explained to him in the course of the thing, with that heartbreaking and totally devastating conclusion to that storyline with Shane and Carol and Carol's daughter Sophia and all that stuff. But everybody that they bump into, the governor thinks he's doing the right thing. It's I'm helping these people. I didn't ask for this, but it just turns out that I'm a leader and I have the strength to do what needs to be done. The cop in the hospital who was running the hospital,
right.
You don't understand. If I don't do this, it's like Jack Nicholson on the wall in A Few Good Men. If I'm not up on that wall, we're all going to die, right? So everybody's trying to do what they think is right. And a lot of times they get a comeuppance of, I'm not right about this.
Well, there are those characters, but then there are kind of the weak and the ones who are really just trying to save their own skin.
Yeah.
Right? Like the guy who's pretending to be the scientist.
Right.
The guy with the inexplicable mullet. You're
Yeah.
just like, that would not be happening. Nobody
Right.
has that hairstyle, let alone a scientist. So, yeah, I mean, you have kind of the weak and the selfish, and then you have... I think my favorite characters aren't the ones that are taking those kind of out-front leadership positions or the truly kind of awful... They were awful before the zombies came, and they're still awful now.
Yeah.
But it's those people who, like Carol.
Yeah.
I think Carol's a really interesting character in terms of, we meet her as the, physically and emotionally abused wife.
Yeah.
Who probably doesn't have a college education, probably has been a stay-at-home mom, probably has been used to having authority figures run her life, whether, I'm guessing it was her parents, she seemed like she went straight from her parents' home to this domineering husband.
Getting along to get along.
And really, yeah, kind of, in a sense, I'm sure a lot of viewers end up liking Carol for a lot of reasons, but we can't forget that, she would probably be brought up by Child Protective Services as having allowed an abusive husband to abuse her in front of, if not abuse her child directly, right? Like, so she's not a heroic character. She is
she didn't think she is either.
Is weak and immoral in the start, right? And so, but then when you see the turn, so I guess it does take us into season 6, but where she self-exiles. Are you at that point? Am I ruining something?
I thought you were on season 5.
Well, I'm not sure what season I'm on. So we're gonna save Carol for
season 6 is the current season.
Okay.
Are you watching the current season?
So have you seen it where Carol has to take care of the 2 young girls?
Yeah.
Okay. So sorry.
But she didn't self-exile. Rick kicked her out.
That's okay, right. But she didn't fight it either. She kind of went. So I guess okay.
So what you're talking about is one of the most, if not the most amazing, this does not happen on television character arcs ever. Because she was that character that you were describing. She was weak. She was in the background. She was zombie fodder at the beginning. It's like, how long is it going to be before this woman gets eaten by a zombie? And she survived, and then they're killing off beloved characters left and right, and she's still there, and she's getting stronger and stronger. She's finding through her strength, like she's approaching being a better person, but she's still like this. The exile that you're talking about was, once again, like the governor, like other people, I'm doing the right thing. I'm doing what, I don't care if you think it's the wrong thing. If you think it's the wrong thing, then I'm just going to do it quietly in private, and you're not going to see me do it. And it involved killing people who weren't zombies, that's always like a big line. Like I said before, the moral line is always being moved, right? It's like, where is the edge of this? And each character sees it in different ways, and you always find yourself, well, what she did makes sense. Like, those people were going to die anyway, but I totally get why it's horrific, and I get why Rick said, I can't have you around because Tyrese is going to kill you when he finds out that you killed his sister.
Right.
Even though she probably would have been a zombie in a few hours, you know? So all these things make sense. But this woman, so yeah, then you get up into, I don't know what's happening in season 6, but in the one you were talking about with the 2 little girls.
Yeah.
That was just unbelievable. It was unbelievable. I can't believe this show is on television. It's so spectacularly not like anything I've ever seen before.
Well, and I think that's the freedom of the monster genre, right? So they I don't think they would be getting away with it, or as popular as they are, if the zombie creatures were just replaced by really bad people.
Yeah.
I think we have to have this epidemic. We have to have these monsters to allow this level of gruesome
intensity,
violence and intense moral dilemmas beyond anything.
You've never seen moral dilemmas like that. I mean, I was saying this to Christy because we watched Game of Thrones together, and I had to describe the scene in Game of Thrones. You watch Game of Thrones? I had to describe the scene when the mountain killed the viper by gouging his eyes out and crushing his head, because she wouldn't watch it. And I said to her the other day, when I was saying, no, you're right not to watch Walking Dead, I was like, I'm watching Game of Thrones right now, and the, HBO part of what they do is to try to have some kind of shock value or something. It's like, you're getting, this is HBO, it's not television, right? So you're going to get something that's a little bit more violent or a little bit more edgy. And I'm watching this show and I'm like, I still like the show because I'm interested in the characters and stuff, but you used to get this sense of edginess of like, ooh, what's going to happen? Like, how gross is Ramsay Bolton going to be? Like, I don't want to see what's coming up. And now I'm like, whatever, he's going to do something gross, and then eventually they're going to kill him. but I'm not scared of it anymore. Or not, I was never scared of it, but you know what I mean? That sort of...
You don't have a visceral reaction.
There's sort of like this adrenaline thing going on in Game of Thrones that's gone now, because
I think, honestly,
this show trumps it so
Game
much.
of Thrones ever... You know how you talked about really feeling like you were in the scenes of The Walking Dead?
I feel like I'm in the tribe.
And I think the reason that that's possible is not just the good writing, which it is, but is also the realistic, except for the zombies, the realistic setting.
But it's a realistic reaction to the zombies.
Right, exactly.
Like
whereas Game of Thrones, once you're going to have dragons and, magic, it's harder to have that visceral connection with characters. I think Walking Dead keeps you connected because it does feel so much like, if the zombie apocalypse came, this could be my hometown. This could be my hospital. This could be my church, you know? So, whereas the Game of Thrones is always, it's some mix of medieval and fantasy whirled up together in a blender with a bunch of violence, and, it's never going to feel
and it's like,
possible.
It's hard to feel like you would be, I would be one of the, what is the Dothraki horse riding culture that, I don't know.
Like, who knows?
I don't identify with it.
That's why I want you. So I've given you a couple of pop culture homework assignments for upcoming podcasts, but I want you to check out the History Channel's Viking series, because
I've seen it. I've seen 2 episodes of it.
Yeah. I request more. Because I think the reason I'm drawn to the Vikings is it kind of straddles what we're drawn to in The Walking Dead, because while it is obviously a different time in history, it's supposed to be, kind of relatively historically accurate. But things are horrific beyond, and the norms of battle and the circumstances of humanity are so different. But at the same time, possible.
Yeah,
So
and the intense ability to lose your life at
Right,
any moment
right, for sure.
due to illness. Or I read somewhere that I either read this or I might have heard it on a different podcast, but this guy was saying, there was a time, and it was like that time. There was a time like in medieval Europe,
right, the Dark Ages,
where the most likely cause of death for a man under 25 years old was an axe.
Right.
That's like, oh, okay, that's not the world I live in.
Right.
Right. That's the most likely way that you're gonna die. Like when they're digging up
Right.
archaeological
the marks
bones,
in the skull.
yeah, axe wounds all over the place.
Right. So that's why I think that series is interesting in those levels. And then, but back to AMC, you know, they deserve a lot of credit for kind of innovating beyond what I think anybody thought the channel was capable of.
Yeah.
And they have a new series that I think is premiering
Preacher?
tonight.
Yeah.
So I think we should also check that out.
Yeah, I'd like to get in on the ground floor of that one.
Yeah, I think we should get on.
Is it supposed to be good? I haven't heard anything about it.
I don't know, except they keep advertising it in a way that makes me think it's going to be good by saying it's from the writers of Breaking Bad.
And it's based on another graphic novel like Walking Dead.
So I think it'll be worth checking out. And what I don't know, because I don't know enough about it, is whether there is going to be an element of magic or fantasy, or whether this is just going to be pure awful human beings.
Yeah.
I feel like there's going to be some supernatural element. That's my gut instinct.
It kind of looked to me like I got sort of a Stephen King Dark
Right.
Tower vibe.
Right. Well, and you know, frankly, if you're going to call something the preacher, getting back to the introduction of faith, and you've got the possibility of Satan or demonic possession, I feel like there's going to be some Satan or demonic possession going on there.
Yeah.
So I think that'll
Which,
be
if they can make that realistic in a way, you know, that I think that would be interesting.
right. And they promise, again, back to the trailer, promises that it's kind of funny as well.
Mm-hmm.
Which obviously The Walking Dead is not.
The Walking Dead is like
Not
the
funny.
least funny thing I've
Very
ever
much
seen.
Not funny.
I'm just in abject shock when I watch The Walking Dead all the time.
Now I forgot to ask, have you ever seen any of the series iZombie?
No.
Okay.
Because I, like Jose, I'm not interested in zombies. I've seen zombie movies, and when I was 15, you know, I enjoyed Dawn of the Dead, the one that took place
Right.
in the shopping mall,
Right.
and it was funny. I'm laughing at it more than anything
Right.
else. But I'm like, you know, I would hold, previous to seeing this television show, and this is why it took me years to even watch it, I believe the zombie is the most boring of the horror creature. You know, they don't do anything.
Right.
And I get what we were talking about before of like what it is metaphorically to different people and all that stuff, but this ain't that.
Right.
This is incredible character work by the writing and the producing and the directing. Wonderful directing, like the Frank Darabont stuff at the beginning was so cool. Like even just the little things that they did, like when they flipped that car over at the beginning. I'm talking about the pilot. I'm watching the pilot, and they're outside and on the side of the highway in Georgia, and they're filming, and it's like this golden hour thing. The sun seems to be going down. The lighting is amazing, and they're filming it. It really looked to me like they were shooting it on real film, because it looked like a movie that was made in the 1970s, like when movies were a little slower, a little more cinematic,
Right.
No special effects. They're gonna, because in this thing, hey, they're flipping real cars.
Right.
You know, I was like, oh wow, this is pretty cool. There's stunt drivers going around, and they had several cameras ready for this, and they flipped it and rolled it over 10 times, and I felt like I was watching Vanishing Point or something with Clint Eastwood. Or he wasn't in Vanishing Point, but I felt like I was watching an old Clint Eastwood movie. That was all really impressive. The storytelling was really impressive, and I said to myself, all right, I'll just watch this until it's not good anymore. And I'm still watching it, and I'm still like the thing in season 5 when, well, first of all, the one that you were talking about with Tyrese and Carol and those 2 little girls, that was just crushing. And then after that, because they I guess it was season 4, I guess they started really splitting the characters up, and everyone was having like their own adventure, and It was kind of like, you know, I love comic books, and one of the cool things I loved comic books as a kid, one of the cool things about comic books was always when they take one character and match him with another, you know, and it's unusual. They come out of their thing. So when they're mixing and matching, and when they put Daryl and Beth together, I was like, I can kind of guess what this is going to be like. It was so much better than what I was guessing it was going to be like. That one made me cry. I've never cried watching The Walking Dead. It brought a tear to my eye. And then, I'm not even going to get into the rest of the stuff in the hospital, but that was genuinely upsetting, the way that ended. I didn't like that at all. No. And I have not watched the show since that happened. Because it's like they everybody's okay, and it's okay, it's all going to be okay, and then they took that away from you, and again, it's like, because this can happen like this, and I want to just make this clear, because I'm starting to think that I was somewhat misunderstood. I'm not saying that the show is saying that there isn't anything after this and you can't handle it. What I'm saying is that the show is saying, you keep saying there isn't anything after this. You, the modern human being, that there is nothing after life. There's no spirit. There's no nothing. We're showing you what you're saying. Are you sure you believe this?
So you think it's a challenge to atheism?
Yeah.
In that sense.
I mean, I think it is saying that there's a spiritual reality, or at least what it's saying is, are you sure you want to say that there isn't? Because I personally believe that there is, but for me, it doesn't have anything to do with religion. I mean, I came up with religion, so I felt like I learned that, but my reaction to it wasn't to reject spirituality. I just sort of walked away from the religion. This show, and I feel like modernity is an overreaction to walking away from religion. The materialist culture of, I think, saying that there's nothing but chemical things firing in your brain, and the sense that, you know, your memories and the idea that there's something beyond, and you feel like you're seeing glimpses into something that you haven't seen, and it's, you know, that's all an illusion. I think that's kind of nuts, really, and I think that that's what our culture says, and I think that this show is, and again, because you were pointing out, they never mention it. Well, they certainly don't mention religion, but they never mention any kind of spirituality. I just think they're showing it to you. Right,
but so it seems very intentional for them not to talk about the idea of a soul, right? Which is, as you said, kind of core to this idea that the brain/person transitions from being that person to being a zombie.
Yeah.
So what is lost in the death?
Yeah.
Seems to be the humanity, right? Like they're they turn into a people-eating machine,
right?
Which clearly they were not before. So, you know.
But they're not people, though. That's the point. They're just
so it kind of posits that if there is no soul,
word.
So then is the zombie death the death of the soul? Because if
well, it's probably the release of the soul. But it's like, the machine is the perfect word, because the modern scientific standard line, which, by the way, I don't think most scientists necessarily believe this, but science as a collective does espouse this, that we're basically machines. We're some kind of robot that's functioning with chemicals and all these things,
and then anything we do that's moral is just a rational choice,
or
socialized norms,
and it's no different than a computer becoming self-aware or whatever. And I feel like this show, whether it's intentionally doing this or not, I feel like it's picking at that, you know, like that's some kind of a scab. That's a weak spot that people who live in the modern world, who may watch a television show, any given television show, I think that that's a sore spot. And they don't say we're picking at a sore spot. They don't say anything about spirituality, like you said. They're just showing you over and over again that if you think that you are a machine, well, here's the machine. Is that you? Right? Because you find yourself as a member of this tribe, you know, rooting for you. Kill that thing before it bites you. Right. But it's not a person. It's a machine. But
I go back to the people in the show to say the writers are equally pointing out that a living person who, if you believe has a soul, mm-hmm. can still be rotten.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So the zombies have the rotting bodies, but some of the living people have kind of rotten souls.
Sure.
And so the soul is not necessarily pristine or
But then you can get into
sacred.
this notion, which, I mean, you know, I don't mean to be going on and on about this, but this is something that I explore in my work. My fiction is about this. It's about...
I just want to say I might be having a coughing fit.
Okay.
Sorry. I don't want to cough over really important things.
Did we talk before? Do you know what King's X is about? The novel that I wrote?
I know a little bit about it.
Well, so just in a nutshell, it's people are reincarnated. Everyone is reincarnated, but the heroes remember their past lives, like, perfectly. So if you remember a past life, if you remember 2 past lives, and you remember everything that you learned, everything that you read, you're going to be smarter, right? You remember every kung fu move that you ever learned when you were studying at the Shaolin Temple.
But you can use that smartness for good or for evil.
Well, you're still a human being. So, I mean, part of the themes that I explore with this notion is, why are you being incarnated into these bodies over and over again? And the answer would have something to do with it's opportunities to learn, it's opportunities to grow. Like, apparently there aren't opportunities to grow on the other side. In my story, I don't talk about what's on the other side. They don't know what's on the other side. They just remember what happened before. So they die, and then they come back. And they're like, oh yeah, I was that guy. Oh, and I was that guy too. Oh, geez, okay, yeah, I was Mozart. I was Leonardo da Vinci. All right, here we go. What am I going to do now, right? And then there's danger and all kinds of stuff happening to them. But the idea is you keep learning. So all of those characters, Merle had a send-off. You know, all of those characters learned. They didn't necessarily become great people before they died, but the opportunity was there. So the opportunity to grow, the opportunity to be better, the opportunity for whatever you really are, your spirit or whatever that is, your soul, whatever is inhabiting your body right now is doing so for the opportunity for you to learn through the relationships that you have, your family, your work, things that motivate you, drive you. Why do they motivate you? Why am I thinking about this? Why is this important? Or if you happen to live in a zombie world, when is it okay to kill somebody? You know, like, because you don't have to answer questions like that very often. But who knows? You might have when you were living in the time of the Vikings. You know, you probably did. You may very well have died by an axe wound back then. But that's the point, is the body that died of an axe wound isn't you. And I feel personally, and again, I mean, everybody sees things different ways, but to me, looking at it through my own personal lens, that's what I see when I watch this show. I see a whole bunch of people who aren't their bodies getting that.
Right.
Like, started to understand nobody is their bodies, but what are we and why are we doing this?
You know, heartbreaking and gut-wrenching are when we see the characters who consistently strive to do good, facing sorrow after tragedy, after struggle.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, it just doesn't stop.
Yeah. So it's almost like, so stop expecting it to. You know, you do your best, try to find peace and try to learn.
So I guess it is kind of Zen in that sense of being like, you have to be present, you have to live in the moment, because there's definitely no guarantee about the future.
Right.
But I think what's hard is it's very kind of anti.
Well, there's one guarantee about the future, is that it's all going to end for you personally at some point.
I guess
that also is quite in your face in the show. I think it makes people uncomfortable.
What's disconcerting is that in this world of The Walking Dead, if there's nobody around to put your zombie body out of its misery, you could be reanimated into a killing machine. So I think even for the good people, there's that kind of horror possibility.
Yeah, but the
which
point
we don't
is
have to live with right now.
The point that I'm making is that's not you.
Right.
It's not. I mean, I don't. It's not you. It's because that's why it's okay for them to kill their loved ones. Like, that's one of the most poignant things, is they have to wait for that. Like the what was her name? She's passed on, if you're worried about spoilers, but she was my favorite character, the blonde woman, because of that scene in season 1 when her sister was dying and she waited in the field with her sister all night long. It was incredible.
Oh, yeah. Andrea.
And she held her sister as she lay dying for hours, and everybody in the tribe was sitting at a respectful distance, watching and waiting to see if they would need to do something. And then she waited until the moment where she turned into a zombie, and then she killed the body. Right. But her sister wasn't there anymore.
Right. But it does discourage you as a viewer from forming attachments to characters, because the ones you get attached to, sadly, often are killed off, which is not just true of this series, but of other series as well. So I think that's something that you kind of have to reconcile. And that's when you're talking about why do people stop watching. I think that could be one of those turning point moments where people have gotten really attached to a character that they thought was going to be in it for the long haul, and then all of a sudden that character is no more.
Well, that's what I mean. That's when I said that this show makes people tap out. It's like, okay, I can't do it anymore, you know. And I find it funny that their reaction is, this show sucks. Like, because I was just reading stuff. It's like, so you've been watching it for 4 seasons religiously, and now all of a sudden it's badly written. Like, because that's what they're saying. Because the reason I don't like it is because it's not well written. I'm like, really? Have you ever seen television before? Because this is not bad television writing. but obviously they have. They loved it. They were watching it. But something happened. And I feel like something like what you just said. Yeah, absolutely. But something happens that I just think it's too challenging, because TV shows don't challenge people. I mean, this one really hits you where it's important, and it challenges people in a place that a lot of people prefer not to think about. You know, I mean, we're living in first world economic situations, and our science is curing diseases left and right. We're going to live forever. We're going to upload our minds into robots or whatever, all this stuff that people are talking about doing. We don't think about, you know, Ted Williams, the baseball player, when he died, had his head frozen so that when technology comes along, it can be put on in some kind of robotic body and Ted Williams will be alive again. That's what was going on in his brain before he died, in his mind. This show is saying that's absurd, right? Like, the one thing that is going to happen is you're going to lose people, and they're eventually going to lose you. So you might want to get on the ball of figuring out who you are and what you're doing here.
Yeah. I think for me, though, as a sociologist, what the frustrating scenes are when you can imagine a new civilization coming into existence. Like, okay, you're in the prison now. Right. Just reinforce the walls, and you can live there for a long time. You can farm, and you can do this and that. Well, but no, because other malfunctioning human beings are going to come mess it up, right? Again, it's back to the zombies are the nuisance. They're not the agents of destruction in the large sense. Right. It's the other human beings that are. Well, and the unspoken thing is certainly regular human beings caused the zombie apocalypse in some way. Well, they just haven't said what it was. Yeah, and I haven't started the pre-series. I haven't watched that either. Is it Fear the Walking Dead? Fear the Walking Dead. Right, it's right? Yeah, I think it's supposed to be how this happened. Right, so I'm guessing it's some kind of bioengineered that should be another homework assignment for us this summer. But I don't know if I have another one in me because I love this show, but it is taxing to watch. Yeah. It's draining. Again, it's the medical sociologist in me. I want to know how they're going to explain this epidemic. But I also think, again, it's not accidental that the rise in the love of zombies comes after the AIDS epidemic took hold of the popular imagination, right? Like this idea that there can be diseases that come on quickly and kill otherwise healthy young people. So I think there's the media generated fear of the next epidemic happens every year or so. Well, the Ebola, when you had people coming back who were supposedly taking all precautions over in the African countries that were hit with the Ebola epidemic, they were getting infected. Yeah. That was like me going like, okay, clearly we don't understand how this disease spreads. Right. If these people were not stuck by needles and came back infected. Right. So, nature will continue. We have, the rise of the night-bearing bacteria and antibiotic-resistant strains. Right. So we have every reason to fear the microbiotic world.
Mm-hmm. There's another show that I do watch with Christy. Have you seen, what is it called? The Last Ship? It's the same plot. It's based on a novel, like a thriller novel, and then they made it into a series, but it's some kind of biological contagion, a man-made disease. It's a naval vessel is out at sea, and they come back and everybody's dead. So they're the last, so it's the premise of the show. It's actually very much like The Walking Dead, only without the zombies and without the violence, and it's not as good. It's not a bad show, but it's not awesome, I'm just talking about the quality of it. It's not incredibly well written with incredible characters. It's just more or less kind of fun. But it's the same plot, just without the zombies. And all the people that they meet up against are the same. They're seeing it all from their own point of view, and some of them are trying to cash in on it, and some of them are trying to, save the world or whatever. Although I do find that the characters, their rationale is not as rich as it is, because it's not as simple. That's the thing, is Walking Dead is so simple.
Yeah.
It boils everything about being a person down
and that's
to,
again where I think having a simple monster like the zombie is more compelling for highlighting human frailties.
Yeah.
Whereas the vampire monster is still so human.
Yeah.
That while it's interesting, I was going to say I have to give credit to True Blood for being a vampire series that I think was well written and interesting,
mm-hmm.
and tackling some social issues. But yeah, there's something about the simple nature of the zombie monster
mm-hmm.
that provides a really
and what you
stark
can do
landscape
about it.
for what humans have to deal with.
Right. But with vampires, I mean, horror as a genre is a sister genre to fantasy, right? It's sort of like the dark side of that. And vampires and werewolves and all that stuff, you have a different relationship to monsters like that. Those are monsters that come up from your dreams. And like vampires, there's always like a sexual.
Right.
There's nothing like that with this. This is life and death, and it's going to happen right now if you don't find a weapon or stop being so scared that you can't move. You are going to have to be a hero for yourself right now, right? And everything is that intense.
So I think that's what I'm saying, because the zombie as a monster has zero humanity.
Yeah.
Just the rotting shell of the body, right?
Now we're on the same page.
Because that zombie has zero humanity, it allows the viewers instead to focus on the humanity or lack thereof in the living people characters.
Right.
Whereas the vampire monster, the werewolf monster, is still so human in so many ways.
Yeah.
You can feel attached, and you can feel bad if they're killed even, because they have some attractive qualities at different points in their storylines. There's nothing attractive about the zombie, right? There's nothing,
and there's also not really anything otherworldly about it. Like I said, vampires are sort of
it's
like
the
dream
worst
creatures
of the realities of decay and decomposition.
Right.
So, and I give
and
the
people
special
have a
effects
natural horror of seeing things like that, and the special effects in it
they deserve lots of credit, both the CGI and the actual prosthetic and makeup.
Yeah, I'm kind of blown away by the CGI that I don't know what kind of budget they have, but the kill shots in the show look so good. Like so real. Like it's like that was definitely an actor right up to the moment where the knife went in or the head exploded or whatever it was. And I feel like, I mean, I would expect that was something with a huge budget, like a movie, but a cable TV show on AMC, I'm really impressed with how good all that looks.
Have we just done a big promo for AMC?
I guess we did. And we've been talking for a while. This is probably a good time to wrap it up.
Before we wax poetic some more.
Yeah, but it's also getting to the point where the quiet room that we do this is beginning to get very hot, right? Are you noticing that? It's very warm. Okay, so Adina Nack, was great. I've been dying to talk about this. I'd like to talk about it or anything else with you again sometime in the future. This was fantastic. You wanted to talk about movies from the 1980s and how well they hold up.
I foresee a future podcast about especially Gen X parents who grew up with the John Hughes movies and now have children that they think might be old enough to enjoy them. And how enjoyable are the John Hughes teen movie in the context of the 21st century?
That's it. Okay. All right. I'm in. Everybody knows those movies. This will be fun. So that's it for today. Thank you, Adina. We'll see you again. And goodbye, everybody. Would you like to say goodbye to the people?
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.